the center of this tragic tale were two individuals whose lives became inextricably intertwined. Lydia Harrington, a 34-year-old art history professor at Ann Arbor Community College, was known for her brilliant mind and captivating lectures. Noah Bellamy, a struggling freshman with dreams of becoming a photographer, was drawn to her. Like a moth to a flame, what began as mentorship slowly twisted into a web of manipulation, desire, and ultimately murder. As investigators peeled back the layers of their relationship, they uncovered a dark tale of exploitation, obsession, twisted fantasies, and deadly desperation. Lydia Harrington's journey to Ann Arbor was paved with academic accolades and personal turmoil. Born to wealthy parents in New York City, Lydia showed early signs of exceptional intelligence. Her father, a stern corporate lawyer, and her mother, a socialite with a penchant for fine art, provided Lydia with every material advantage but little emotional support. From a young age, Lydia learned to use her intellect as a shield, burying herself in art and books to escape the cold reality of her home life. She excelled in school, skipping 2 grades and entering Columbia University. It was there that Lydia discovered her passion for art history, her talent for captivating an audience. After completing her PhD at the University of Chicago, Lydia seemed destined for a prestigious position at a top institution. However, a scandal involving an affair with her married thesis advisor derailed those plans. The academic community's whispered judgments and thinly veiled rejection drove Lydia to seek refuge in the more subdued setting of Ann Arbor. At Ann Arbor Community College, Lydia quickly established herself as a rising star. Her lectures on Renaissance art and modern art movements drew students from other departments, and her innovative teaching methods earned her the admiration of both colleagues and students. Dr. Harrington was the epitome of success, brilliant, beautiful, and dedicated to her craft. But beneath the polished exterior lay a woman haunted by her past and driven by an insatiable need for validation. Lydia's relationships were often intense but short-lived, leaving her feeling empty and misunderstood. She craved the adoration of her students, basking in their admiration, and subtly encouraging their dependence on her guidance. A psychological evaluation conducted after her arrest would later reveal a complex personality disorder characterized by narcissistic traits and a deep-seated fear of abandonment. It was this dangerous cocktail of intelligence, charisma, and unresolved emotional issues that set the stage for her fateful encounter with Noah Bellamy. In him, Lydia saw not just another student to mold, but a chance to reclaim the youth and passion she felt slipping away. Noah Bellamy's path to Ann Arbor Community College was far from typical. Born in a working-class neighborhood in Toledo, Ohio, Noah was the youngest of 4 children in a family that struggled to make ends meet. His father, Arthur Bellamy, worked long hours as an auto mechanic, while his mother juggled multiple part-time jobs to keep food on the table. From an early age, Noah found solace in the world of photography. While his siblings excelled in sports and practical skills, Noah was the dreamer of the family. He would often be found wandering the streets with a second-hand camera, capturing the world through his lens. Noah's high school years were marked by academic inconsistency. Brilliant in subjects that captured his imagination, like photography and history, he struggled with the rigid structures of math and science. His guidance counselor, Mrs. Harper, recalled that Noah had a spark of genius when it came to photography, but he lacked the discipline and confidence to truly shine. Despite his potential, Noah's grades were mediocre, and his college applications were met with rejection. Disappointment was a bitter pill to swallow. But beneath Noah's artistic temperament lay a young man grappling with self-doubt and a desperate need for validation. It was this combination of raw talent, emotional vulnerability, and a burning desire to prove himself that made Noah the perfect target for Lydia Harrington's manipulation. In her, he saw not just a mentor, but a gateway to the intellectual and artistic world he so desperately wanted to join. As the fall semester began, Noah could never have imagined that his pursuit of artistic greatness would lead him down a dark path of ethical compromises, emotional entanglement, and ultimately, the shores of Nichols Arboretum, where his young life would be cut tragically short. The first day of advanced photography class was a turning point in both Lydia and Noah's lives. Though neither could have predicted the tragic course their paths would take, Lydia, impeccably dressed in a tailored blazer and pencil skirt, commanded the room with her presence. Her eyes scanned the sea of fresh faces, pausing momentarily on Noah, hunched in the back row, nervously fiddling with his camera. As Lydia launched into her introductory lecture on the power of visual narrative, Noah found himself captivated. Her words seemed to speak directly to him, igniting a passion he had long kept buried. When she asked the class to share their favorite photographers, Noah surprised himself by raising his hand. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke of his admiration for Ansel Adams, earning an approving nod from Lydia. After class, Lydia approached Noah. She'd been impressed by his insight and encouraged him to consider submitting his work to the college's art magazine. Noah, flushed with pride, stammered his thanks. This brief interaction planted the seeds of what would become a dangerous obsession for both of them. Over the next few weeks, Noah became a fixture in Lydia's office hour. What began as discussions about assignments gradually evolved into deep conversations about photography, life, and Noah's aspirations. Lydia, recognizing Noah's raw talent and vulnerability, began to subtly shape their interactions. She would lean in closely when reviewing his work, her perfume lingering in the air. Her feedback was a careful mix of praise and criticism, designed to keep Noah constantly seeking her approval. She shared personal anecdotes, creating an illusion of intimacy that blurred the lines of the student-teacher relationship. Noah's classmate, Sophie Brooks, later told investigators, "We all noticed how Dr. Harrington treated Noah differently. At first, we were just jealous of the attention, but looking back, there was something off about it." As midterms approached, Noah was struggling in his other classes. The pressure to maintain his scholarship weighed heavily on him. Sensing his distress, Lydia made her first overt move. After a particularly long office meeting, she placed her hand on Noah's arm and spoke softly. "I see so much potential in you, Noah. I'd hate to see it go to waste because of a few difficult classes. Perhaps we could work out an arrangement to ensure your success." Noah, naive and desperate to prove himself, failed to recognize the dangerous territory he was entering. He interpreted Lydia's offer as a lifeline, a chance to focus on his true passion without the fear of losing his scholarship. As autumn painted the Ann Arbor campus in shades of gold and red, Lydia and Noah's relationship intensified. She invited him to exclusive art exhibitions, introducing him to her colleagues as a promising protégé. Noah, intoxicated by this new world of intellectual stimulation and perceived belonging, began to rely on Lydia for more than just academic guidance. Lydia, for her part, reveled in Noah's dependence. She carefully crafted every interaction to deepen his emotional attachment, while maintaining plausible deniability. To her colleagues, she was merely nurturing a gifted student. To Noah, she became the center of his world. By the time the fall semester was coming to a close, the boundary between mentor and student had become irrevocably blurred. Noah's photography, once filled with diverse influences, now mimicked Lydia's style and preferences. His social circle had shrunk, with more and more of his time devoted to extra study sessions with Dr. Harrington. Neither Noah nor Lydia fully realized the dangerous web they were weaving. As the winter break approached, their relationship teetered on the brink of a precipice, ready to plunge into depths from which there would be no return. The winter break marked a critical turning point in Lydia and Noah's relationship. With the campus largely deserted, they found themselves drawn into a vortex of intensifying emotions and crossed boundaries. Lydia, under the guise of providing additional mentorship, invited Noah to her off-campus apartment to discuss his final project for her class. The evening began innocently enough, with Lydia serving tea and engaging Noah in a heated debate about postmodern art. But as the hours wore on and inhibitions lowered, the atmosphere shifted. Lydia, her voice lowered to a near whisper, began to share personal stories of her own struggles as a young academic. She portrayed herself as a misunderstood genius, persecuted by jealous colleagues and bound by the rigid structures of academia. Noah, already in awe of Lydia's intellect, found himself drawn deeper into her world. He saw in her a kindred spirit, someone who truly understood the artist's struggle. When Lydia's hand brushed against his, the electric charge between them was undeniable. What happened next would be a point of contention in the later investigation. Lydia claimed that Noah initiated the kiss, overcome by youthful passion. Noah, in his final statement, insisted that Lydia had orchestrated the entire evening to this end. Regardless of who made the first move, that night marked the beginning of a physical relationship that would have devastating consequences. As the new semester began, Lydia and Noah's secret affair intensified. What had started as clandestine meetings in her office turned into long weekends at secluded bed and breakfast. Lydia showered Noah with gifts, rare art books, expensive camera equipment, a laptop to replace his outdated model. She framed each gift as an investment in his future as an artist, as a photographer, further binding him to her. Noah's grades, which had been middling in his other classes, suddenly skyrocketed. Lydia used her influence to intervene on his behalf with other professors, painting him as a misunderstood genius who simply needed the right guidance. She promised Noah that, with her help, he could secure a spot in a prestigious MFA program, bypassing the usual requirement. But as Noah's dependence on Lydia grew, so did his anxiety. The initial thrill of their forbidden romance began to give way to guilt and fear of discovery. His photography, once vibrant and unique, became a pale imitation of Lydia's style. His few remaining friends noticed his increasing isolation and erratic behavior. Lydia, sensing Noah's unease, doubled down on her manipulation. She alternated between lavish praise and cruel criticism, keeping Noah in a constant state of emotional turmoil. She convinced him that their relationship was special, a meeting of twin souls that the ordinary world could never understand. In a particularly chilling move, Lydia began to insinuate that Noah's success was entirely dependent on her goodwill. During one tense encounter in her office, she casually remarked, "It would be a shame if the ethics board were to investigate the sudden improvement in your grades. They might get the wrong idea about how you've been earning them." The implied threat was clear. Noah, trapped between his ambition and his growing sense of moral unease, began to withdraw into himself. His journal entries from this period, later recovered by investigators, paint a picture of a young man in deep emotional distress. February 15th. I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I've achieved feels tainted. How can something so wrong feel so necessary? March 3rd. Lydia says she's the only one who truly understands me. Maybe she's right. The thought of losing her terrifies me more than anything. As spring bloomed on the Ann Arbor campus, the web of lies and manipulation had grown so thick that Noah could scarcely remember his life, or Lydia. His family, worried by his increasingly infrequent calls home, planned a surprise visit. Lydia, paranoid about discovery, forced Noah to rebuff them, causing a painful rift. It was during this time that Noah began to confide in his roommate, Jordan Peters. While he didn't reveal the full extent of his relationship with Lydia, he shared enough for Jordan to become deeply concerned. Jordan's worried glances and pointed questions about Noah's relationship with Dr. Harrington would later prove to be the thread that would begin to unravel the whole sordid affair. As the semester neared its end, the pressure on both Lydia and Noah intensified. Their relationship, built on a foundation of manipulation and false promises, was beginning to crack under the weight of its own contradictions. Neither could have predicted the violent culmination that lay just around the corner. Tragic end to a romance that should never have begun. The catalyst for the tragic events that followed came in the form of a seemingly innocuous email. Dr. Valerie Weston, the Dean of Fine Arts, reached out to Lydia about Noah's remarkable academic turnaround, expressing interest in featuring him in a college newsletter. For Lydia, this well-intentioned inquiry set off alarm bells. The thought of increased scrutiny on Noah's achievements filled her with panic. In a frenzy, Lydia called Noah to her office after hours. The tension was palpable as she paced the room, outlining the danger they were in. Noah, already worn down by months of emotional manipulation, felt the last vestiges of his self-worth crumbling. It was in this charged atmosphere that Noah finally found the courage to confront the reality of their situation. His voice barely above a whisper, he said, "This isn't right, Lydia. What we're doing is destroying me." Lydia's reaction was swift and cruel. Her nurturing facade cracked, revealing the ruthless manipulator beneath. She reminded Noah of all she had done for him, how his success was entirely due to her influence. In a chilling moment, she asked, "Do you really think you'd be anything without me?" You're nothing but a small-town boy with delusions of grandeur. I made you, Noah." Noah, his eyes opened to the toxic nature of their relationship, felt a surge of anger and self-preservation. He shot back. "This ends now. I'm going to tell the dean everything." The color drained from Lydia's face. Her carefully constructed world teetered on the brink of collapse. In a last-ditch effort to maintain control, she alternated between threats and pleas, reminding Noah of the consequences they would both face if the truth came to light. But something had shifted in Noah. Fog of infatuation and manipulation had lifted, revealing the stark reality of his situation. He turned to leave, his hand on the doorknob when Lydia's voice, now ice-cold, stopped him. "If you walk out that door, I'll make sure you never photograph again." Noah paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Then, without turning back, he walked out, leaving Lydia alone with the ruins of her twisted fantasy. The following days were a blur for both Noah and Lydia. Noah, emboldened by his decision, confided the full extent of the affair to his roommate, Jordan. Together, they decided to approach Dean Weston with the truth. Lydia, meanwhile, spiraled into panic. She alternated between desperate attempts to contact Noah and frantic efforts to cover her tracks. She deleted emails, shredded documents, and called in favors from colleagues to vouch for her character. As Noah prepared to meet with the dean, couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Lydia's threats echoed in his mind, but he was determined to reclaim his life and his integrity. Little did he know that Lydia, driven to the brink by the imminent exposure of her crimes, was formulating a desperate and deadly plan to silence him forever. On the night of the murder, Noah Bellamy left the library just after midnight, his mind preoccupied with the meeting he had scheduled with Dean Weston the following morning. As he walked along the deserted path that skirted Nichols' Arboretum, he failed to notice the figure emerging from the shadows behind him. Lydia Harrington had spent the day in a state of frenzied planning. Her rational mind had been overwhelmed by a toxic mix of fear, rage, and desperation. In her distorted reality, silencing Noah had become the only way to preserve the life she had built. She had waited for hours, watching the library entrance, a large rock clutched in her trembling hands. As Noah approached a secluded bend in the path, Lydia made her move. The first blow caught Noah by surprise, sending him stumbling forward. He turned, shock and betrayal etched on his face as he recognized his attacker. "Lydia, I trusted you," he gasped, but Lydia was beyond reason. With a strength born of desperation, she struck again and again. Noah's attempts to defend himself were weakened by his reluctance to hurt the woman he had once admired and loved. In the aftermath of her violent act, Lydia stood frozen, the reality of what she had done crashing over her. The fog seemed to close in, muffling the sound of Noah's body as it slid down the embankment into the dark waters of the Huron River. With mechanical efficiency, Lydia began to cover her track. She gathered Noah's scattered belongings, wiping them clean of fingerprints before tossing them into the water. She scoured the area for any evidence that might link her to the scene. As the first light of dawn began to break through the mist, Lydia made her way back to her apartment, clothes sodden and muddied. Over the next few days, Lydia attempted to maintain a facade of normalcy. She taught her classes, attended faculty meetings, all while battling the internal chaos of her guilt and fear. When Noah was reported missing, she feigned concern, even joining search parties organized by the college. But the weight of her actions took its toll. Colleagues noted her distracted demeanor and uncharacteristic nervousness. A psychology professor who had known Lydia for years later recalled, "There was a wildness in her eyes, a tension in her movements. It was as if she was constantly on the verge of flight." Lydia's carefully constructed alibi began to unravel almost immediately. The rock she had used as a weapon, hastily discarded in a dumpster behind her apartment building, was discovered by a maintenance worker. Security camera footage placed her car near Nichols' Arboretum on the night of Noah's disappearance, contradicting her claim of being home all night. As the investigation intensified, Lydia's paranoia reached new heights. She became convinced that everyone knew her secret. In a moment of panic, she attempted to flee, hastily packing a bag and withdrawing large sums of cash from her bank account. It was this erratic behavior ultimately led to her undoing. Noah's body, weighed down by rocks, was discovered by a group of students on a weekend fishing trip. The grim discovery sent shockwaves through the Ann Arbor community and marked the beginning of the end for Lydia Harrington. The discovery of Noah Bellamy's body transformed the missing person case into a full-blown homicide investigation. Detective Natalie Quinn, a veteran of the Ann Arbor Police Department, took charge of the case. Her first steps were to secure the crime scene and order a comprehensive forensic analysis of the area surrounding Nichols Arboretum. The autopsy revealed that Noah had died from blunt force trauma to the head, with drowning as a secondary cause of death. The medical examiner noted defensive wounds on Noah's arms, indicating he had tried to protect himself from his attacker. As news of the murder spread, the campus of Ann Arbor Community College became a hotbed of speculation and fear. Students whispered in hallways, casting suspicious glances at their peers and professors. The administration, desperate to control the narrative, held press conferences assuring parents and the community that this was an isolated incident. Detective Quinn and her team began the painstaking process of interviewing Noah's friends, family, and associates. It was during these initial interviews that Noah's roommate, Jordan Peters, provided the first crucial lead. Jordan revealed Noah's troubled relationship with Professor Harrington, including vague references to an arrangement that had left Noah increasingly distressed in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. This information led investigators to take a closer look at Lydia Harrington. On the surface, she appeared to be a grieving mentor, distraught over the loss of a promising student. However, as detectives dug deeper, inconsistencies in her story began to emerge. A breakthrough came when forensic analysts discovered traces of soil on the rock used to attack Noah that matched samples from Lydia's garden. Additionally, security footage from a gas station near Nichols Arboretum showed Lydia's car in the area on the night of the murder, contradicting her alibi. As the evidence mounted, Lydia's colleagues began to come forward with their own observations. A professor from the psychology department recalled a disturbing conversation with Lydia just days before Noah's disappearance. She seemed agitated, told investigators. She kept talking about how she couldn't let everything she'd worked for be destroyed by a misunderstanding. The investigation took another turn when detectives uncovered a series of emails between Lydia and Noah. While carefully worded, the subtext of these messages hinted at an inappropriate relationship. IT specialists recovered deleted drafts of emails from Lydia's college account that were far more explicit, detailing her manipulation of Noah and her fears of exposure. Search of Lydia's apartment yielded damning evidence. Hidden in a locked drawer, detectives found Noah's journal, which detailed the evolution of their relationship, his growing desire to end it. With the wealth of physical evidence and witness testimony, the district attorney's office felt confident in charging Lydia Harrington with first-degree murder. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community, shattering the image of the brilliant, dedicated professor, and exposing the dark underbelly of power dynamics in academia. As Lydia was led away in handcuffs, true scope of her deception began to unravel, leaving the Ann Arbor community to grapple with the question of how such a predator had hidden in plain sight for so long. Over the next several hours, Lydia's full confession emerged, painting a disturbing picture of manipulation, abuse of power, and ultimately murder. She spoke of her initial attraction to Noah's talent and vulnerability, how easy it had been to shape him to her will. Her voice filled with bitterness as she recounted Noah's decision to expose their relationship, describing it as a betrayal that left her no option but to silence him permanently. The trial of Lydia Harrington was brief but intense. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, from forensic analysis to Lydia's own confession. Despite a vigorous defense attempting to paint her as a victim of her own mental illness, the jury took only 6 hours to return a guilty verdict on all counts. The judge, her voice heavy with the weight of the moment, sentenced Lydia to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The aftermath of the trial saw significant changes at Ann Arbor Community College. The administration implemented strict new guidelines governing faculty-student interactions, and mandatory training on recognizing and reporting inappropriate behavior was instituted. As the Ann Arbor community slowly began to heal, The tragedy left an indelible mark. The shores of Nichols Arboretum, once a place of tranquility and reflection, now stood as a somber reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most respectable facades and the tragic consequences when trust is abused and power is unchecked.